Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channels, Next Gen Lawyers, and today we will be discussing an important Supreme Court judgment under the Dowry Prohibitions Act 1961. This case was basically between the Gopal Reddy and the state of Andhra Pradesh, which was decided in 1996. This case is very important. Like Supreme Court had explained two main principles, legal principles, and the first one was whether the demand made before the marriage can be treated as a dowry, and the second one which the Supreme Court has given is that what kind of evidence is required to convict a person in a criminal case. So this judgment shows that while the law strictly oppose the dowry, a person can be punished only when the allegations are proven with a strong and reliable evidence. So let's see how this case has begins, what are the facts, what are the evidence, and what are the judgments which was given by the Supreme Court. Okay, now let's seize the bench and the case details. This case was decided by the Supreme Court of India on 11 July 1996, and the bench consists of a Justice A.S. Anand and a Justice N.K. Mukherjee. Let me highlight this. The case begins in 1996 and the bench is A.S. Anand Vijay's and the N.K. Mukherjee's. This case arose under the Dowry Prohibitions Act under 1961 and involved the allegations of a dowry demanding during the marriage negotiations. Now, in this video, we are going to discuss about introductions, which I have already, I think, given. The facts of the case, parties involved, legal issues, what are the legal issues in this case, appellant arguments, that is S. Gopal Reddy arguments, then respondent arguments, that is State of Andhra Pradesh, and the relevant laws. You will see the relevant laws, 11 sections under this Prohibitions Act, then the judgment, and finally the conclusions. So let's begin with the facts of the case. Okay, so actually I have already given the introduction part, what the case is about, how the Supreme Court has laid the legal two principles. If you want, you can just go through this introduction part, which I have already written on the screens, and let's now move to the facts of the case. To understand the judgment, we first need to understand what happened between the two families. Narayan Reddy, a lawyer from Hyderabad, arranged the marriage of his daughter Vani, who was working as a bank cashier with S. Gopal Reddy. Yeah, who was an IPS officer. During the marriage negotiation, discussion took place regarding the gifts, cash, cloth, cash of rupees 1 lakh rupees, and the other valuable properties. According to the complaint, both the families initially agreed that the bride side would provide a house, jewelry, clothes, cash, and other various, valuable items such as money for the purchasing of a car. At first, everything seems normal, but later disagreements started regarding the amount of money which was being demanded by the groom family. And the bride families argued that they will not give money now because their demand is being increasing day by day, and hence they refuse to give them extra monies or extra demands. And for this, due to this dispute, the marriage, which was scheduled for the 2nd November 1985, did not take place. Feeling cheated and insulted, the bride fathers, that is S. Narayan Reddy, filed police complaints on March 1986. After investigations, the groom and his brothers was arrested for cheating and the dowry demands. So this was the fact of the case. I hope you understand the facts of the case. What's the facts of the case? Let me summarize. It was Narayan Reddy, a lawyer from the Hyderabad, who arranged his daughter marriage Vani with the S. Gopal Reddy, who was a IPS officer. During the marriage negotiations, both the families decided that the bride families, that is the Vani's father's families, will give the certain amount of monies, jewelries, clothes, or any others valuable items to the groom family, that is S. Gopal Reddy families, in the marriage negotiations. But after this, the demand of the monies or dowries was increasing day by day, and this is why the groom families have cancelled the marriage because unfulfilling of their demand. So this is the fact of the case. Now let's go further. Now let's talk about the parties involved. The main appellant was S. Gopal Reddy, who was an IPS officer, and the proposed grooms. The second accused was his elder brother, who also participated in the negotiations and demand. The complaint was Sri G. Narayan Reddy, a lawyer and the father of a proposed bride, and the proposed bride was Miss Vanis, who was employed as a bank cashier, and the respondent in the case was the state of Andhra Pradesh, which prosecuted the matters before the court. Now let's go and study is about the legal issues. What are the legal issues in this case? Now let's see what are the legal issues. The Supreme Court had to answer some of the important legal questions, and those legal questions are: the first one is whether the accused had actually demanded the dowry in connections with the marriage. The second one is whether a demand made during the marriage negotiations before the actual wedding can be treated as a dowry under the act, that is Dowry Prohibitions Act. And the third and the last one is whether the evidence produced by the prosecutions was strong enough to prove that the guilty of the accused beyond the reasonable doubt. So these are the three main legal issues where the court have to give their judgment, court have to decide upon this. So now let's move forward. Now let's just talk about the argument of the appellant. The appellant, that is S. Gopal Reddy, argues that he had not personally demanded any dowry. He claimed that if any discussions regarding the money took place, it was mainly between the families and particularly involving his eldest brothers. According to him, he had never made any independent demand himself. He also challenged the letters relied upon by the prosecutions. He denied writing those letters and argued that there was no clear proof, no scientific evidence that proves that those letters is being written by S. Gopal Reddy. The appellant further argues that the criminal liabilities cannot be imposed merely on the assumptions. Since there was no direct or reliable evidence showing that he personally demanded the dowry, he should not be convicted. So these are the arguments made by the appellant. Let's just summarize this. The first arguments made was his, like, he has not independently asked for the dowry or demand any valuable items. The demand was mainly done by his elder brother or his family, so he should not be convicted under the Dowry Prohibitions Act. The second one is he denies the writing those letters because the writing experts evidence or writing expert opinions was very confusing, and hence it does not lead to proper scientific evidence that proves that the particular letters is being written by the S Gopal Reddy. And hence, and another important arguments given by the appellants is that the marriage negotiation was done before the actual wedding or the actual marriage, and hence they are not the husband or the wife. They are not on that status that can be considered as a dowry, because he argues that under the under the sections of a Dowry Prohibitions Act, the only punishment will be given to husband itself, and at that point they are not on that status, they are not the husband, they are just a boy and a girl. And that's why the S Gopal argues that he said that the laws use the word bride and bridegrooms, which means the men and women must already be in that status, and according to him, during the engagement or the marriage talks, the girls and the boys are not yet bride and the bridegroom. So any money talking during that stage should not be treated as a crime under the Dowry Act. Now let's just talk about the arguments made by the respondent. The state of Andhra Pradesh argues that the sufficient evidence existed to show that the dowry demand has been made. According to the prosecutions, the conversations during the marriage negotiations, witnesses' statements, and the letters, then all these incidents shows that the additional monies or the properties were demanded from the bride families. And the state also emphasizes that the purposes of a Dowry Prohibition Act. It argues that if the law was interpreted narrowly, people could simply demand dowry before the marriages and can escape the punishments, and hence the prosecution requested the court to interpret the law broadly so that the dowry demanded connected with the marriage could be punished. So these are the arguments which is made by the respondent. Okay, let's summarize the arguments. The respondent, that is the state of Andhra Pradesh, argues that there are the many sufficient evidence which shows that the dowry is being asked by the groom family, that is S Gopal Reddy families, from the bride families, such as marriage conversations or the marriage negotiations between the families, witnesses statements, or the letters which shows that the additional demand of a dowry is being asked from the bride families. And the second arguments which was given by the respondent, that is the state of Andhra Pradesh, was that he requested the court to interpret the law broadly, because if it is be interpreted narrowly, the people could simply demand the dowry before the marriages and can escape the punishments. Therefore, he requests the Supreme Court of India to interpret the law broadly so that all the dowry demanded connected with the marriages could be punished. Okay, now just let's talk about the relevant laws in this case. The first one is Section 2 that defines the dowries. According to the Supreme Court, it explains that the dowry includes any property, money, or any valuable security demanded or given in connections with the marriage. Such demands may be made before, during, or after the marriage. The court clarify that the actual performance of the marriage is not necessary. If the money or the property is demanded as a condition related to the marriage, it is still amount to dowry. So hence the dowry, according to the section 2, let me highlight this. Section 2 that defines the dowries: any properties or the valuable securities is given or agreed to be given at, before, or after the marriage is considered to be dowry. It is not necessary that the marriage must be actually take place. If a money or the property is being demanded in connections with the marriage, then it will fall under the Dowry Act. Now let's just talk about the section 4 that defines the punishment of a dowry. These provisions make it an offense to directly or indirectly demand the dowry from parents, relatives, or even guardians of a bride or the bridegrooms. The purposes of this section is to discourage the practice of treating a marriage as a financial transaction. The court stressed that any demand connected with the marriage can attract the punishments if properly proven. So, according to the sections, if a person who demanded the dowry can be punished with the imprisonment or a fine or even both. The law provides that the punishment of imprisonment, which can be extended to 6 months, and a fine of 5,000. And the main purposes of this law is to discourage the people from demanding a dowry. Now let's just talk about the section 67 of the Indian Evidence Act. This is the another most important provisions discussed in the case was section 67. This section requires to proof of handwriting or the signatures whenever the documents is aligned to have been written by the particular persons. The prosecutions relied on a certain letters and claims that they were be written by the accused. However, the court observes that the handwritten expert opinions along is allegedly considered weak evidence and should normally be supported by other reliable evidence. This basically is see tells that the section under section 64 the evidence should be scientific and must be proven beyond the reasonable doubt. Hence these are the relevant laws in this cases. Now let's just talk about the judgment given by the Supreme Court of India in the S. Gopal Reddy was the state of Andhra Pradesh case. After examining all the evidence, the Supreme Court made an important distinction. The court agrees that the dowry demands made before the marriage can fall within the definitions of a dowry under the Act, which is Section 2 of the Dowry Prohibitions Act, which, where the court said that the dowry includes any money, properties, valuable items, the demands before, during, or after the marriage if it is demanded as a conditions of a marriage. Therefore even the demand made during the marriage negotiations can be treated as a dowry under the law. However, the court found that there was insufficient evidence to prove that the S. Gopal Reddy himself has personally demanded the dowry. And since the criminal convictions required proof beyond the reasonable doubt, the court held that the prosecution has failed to establish the guilty of the accused with the reliable level of certainty. As a result, the Supreme Court gave the accused a benefit of doubt set aside his convictions because the evidence which was the letter was not proven that the those letters is being written by the S. Gopal Reddy. These letters were sent to handwriting expert, but the expert opinions was not clear and not defined. Hence the court explained that the expert opinion does alone is weak evidence, and due to this the prosecution failed to prove the charge properly, and hence therefore the Supreme Court set aside the earlier convictions and acquitted the accused, that is S. Gopal Reddy. Now let's just talk about the conclusion part. So in this case, it reminds the importance because it gives the clear definitions about the dowry, which is under section 2 of the Dowry Prohibitions Act, and also it gives the principle like fundamental principles of a criminal law, which state that no person can be punished unless the charge is proven through clear, reliable, or the proper scientific evidence. Therefore, while the court strongly supported the objectives of preventing the dowry, it also protects the individual rights of a free trial and prove the beyond the reasonable doubts. Hence, in this case, there was no enough reliable evidence to show that the S. Gopal Reddy personally demanded the dowries. So the court gave him a benefit of doubt and cancelled the convictions. Let me highlight this. Cancel the convictions. The case shows that while the law is strict against the Dowry Prohibitions Act, but it also required a proper proof to make a person guilty. Hence, this is the end of the video. I hope you like this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and